Well, YouTube is telling me I'm offline, which should not be the case. So let's just see what's happening here. Oh, okay. I see myself, so apparently you're seeing me. YouTube is telling me I'm offline. So, hello, Tamu. So, yep, okay, I'm online. It's good. It's just very interesting. I mean, I'm looking at, the live chat, see myself on a 10-second delay. And it's still saying offline, but hey, who cares what it says? So, I've had a pleasantly busy day. Ran into a friend of mine while I was out walking around and doing my shopping, and which enabled me to pick up a few more things that I didn't want to have to carry for my 1.5-mile trip walk back. And then he took me to show me, first of all, he has a beautiful little farm area with a barn he's converting into a performance lounge. And so I had spent a few hours with him, and that was really great. So let me see who's here so I can greet them. I'll start from the bottom. Hello, Deborah Gale and Tamu, Meandering Mystic, Niche, Deborah Rubenfeld, and Raksha, Ellie, Elephant Preferit, 9 Eland, Madfinger. And I think I have gotten everybody's here so far. All right. So, so the title of tonight's Can't You Hear Me Gnostic is Full Moon Aftermath, Unpacking It. And I am aware that how I experience this full moon, along with, again, I do have what I will call a shamanic crowd, where we compare journey notes. Thank you, Tamu. I'm wearing the green to try and keep my heart chakra nice and activated. And also it kind of goes well with the blue-green. But I pick my colors. I tend to pick my colors for a reason. It could any number of reasons why. Sometimes I'll choose colors. It's color magic. And so as I proceed through this unpacking of this full moon experience, part of it is kind of checking in with, people in the live chat here about what it was like for them, so that we can compare notes. And there is a thunderstorm going by. A delightful thunderstorm. And I really want to pick my words carefully, because it certainly seems to be wise. I wouldn't want my words to light any brush fires, because in the coming couple of weeks there'll be conflagrations to deal with, and brush fires are not good preparation. Matter of fact, there might even be distractions. I do recall getting kind of, I belong to Global Mission of Peace too, when I do work with them in another environment. And I just remember, there were certain tasks I perform, and am requested to do from time to time, and I just do them. I do them well. I'm competent. And a request that was no different in any way than any others that came in on Friday. So it was early on. I hadn't been out of bed that long. Matter of fact, I was still drinking my first coffee when I decided to get the business out of the way. And my reaction to what was just another doing business elicited a very strong emotional response from me. Now, let me be clear. I am always in touch with my feelings, and I consider my feelings a rich data stream. Rarely do my feelings turn into emotions, because I don't need those chemicals. The chemicals of emotions are very mind clouding. So I rarely go into like real emotional reactions, because again, we perform at a lower level, in most cases. Hello, Callan. So that happened at around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and at 6 o'clock, Uncle Butchie came over. It was rehearsal. Friday night's a rehearsal time, and I was an absolute wreck. And one of the reasons I don't like to get into emotions is because part of the emotions is you end up with the tapes, the loops that go in your head. Like, you've already processed it and you're doing it again, you're going, and sometimes not only do you not usually get resolved, usually you build up more steam. One of the reasons I don't like to engage in that, those kind of negative emotions. I can register a feeling of rage, a feeling of anger, a feeling of disgust, whatever. But to allow that to actually produce real chemicals, and release them into my bloodstream that go with emotional states, I avoid that, like the mind killer that it is. But it just, for some reason, I just popped. And then, of course, hours later, I'm still trying to get back into my center, because I had lost the ability to monitor the data of my feelings. My feelings were no longer a data stream. Now they were a tsunami. They were no longer something to consider. The feelings became an emotion that owned me. And I didn't quite understand what had happened. And then I kind of realized, oh, this is this full blood moon. Now, we have a full moon every month. But this one, I was different. Same, again, this was like a repeat. This was like almost like a Groundhog Day thing for me, as far as, duties that I perform in Global Mission of Peace. And instead, I went nutty. So once I kind of realized, oh, okay, what made me so different? And I went, okay, this full moon is whacking me in a big way. And once I had that, I was able to do something with it, because then it was because I was like, you want to have the answer. What happened to me? Well, at least now I had an inkling, or maybe even the big clue of what had happened. So that helped me to put things in perspective, and then I started recomposing the situation, and it started to recompose with some logic and some calm. But I realized, but it was like I had snapped. And then, as I was talking to a very dear friend and brother of mine, that probably doesn't need to be mentioned, they're in the chat, so if they want to declare who they are, they can do that. and unpacking it, because I had been through this and I hadn't had a chance to speak to someone just to hear me. And as so often happens when we finally allow ourselves to kind of observe and witness ourselves, you know, as you're speaking, you're monitoring your own speech. And as you're monitoring it, not only are words coming out that give you epiphanies and ahas, but also in this, since you're now speaking and one is calmer, there is more information that was not received in the initial hit. More subtle, quieter information. And so I started realizing that the word or the term snap had a profound meaning and a profound implication. Not only had I snapped, something had snapped. So, moving on into the weekend, because here we are on Monday, there were some live streams. Some I was able to participate live, some I had to, listen to because I wasn't available for them live. And in these cases, feelings were arising and did not turn into emotions. But they were very strong feelings. And they weren't cuddly feelings. No, they weren't cuddly at all. In fact, part of it was almost like holding something in an embrace that you do out of habit and out of compassion and out of friendship. And all of a sudden you look at what you're hugging, what you're embracing. Hello, Christopher. And you recoil. I recoiled. I want to watch my pronouns here. I recoiled. And I resisted that because it felt very unfriendly. Like kind of wrong. And then the interesting thing is part of, some of the stuff that we who share our inner work together. I mean, a lot of, there are groups of us who are doing real inner work, and inner work is best not done not alone. I mean, there's certain parts you have to do alone, that we do alone, and then it's good to have kind of, your partners in journeying, your partners in shamanic work, to share things with. Because the chances are, when you have other people who are doing shamanic work, the chances are that they're journeying also. I mean, shamanic work is something that happens at least at some level every day. In different ways. It doesn't have to be sitting down and banging the drum and going into a full trance. Sometimes just a slightly altered state. Suddenly you find yourself, you're journeying. And there's different places you can journey. There are actual maps, and then there's also the journey of our own imagination, which is tied, but our own imagination is tied into the source of that imagination, which is our planetary mother. So there's that kind of connection. But as I was unpacking this with my friend, became aware that this snapping was something that happened during this full moon. Some connections, or the ability to connect, broke down, snapped. And the best way I would describe it, and of course I'm going, because I was a science major, studied biology, but even in basic science, cells become two cells by the process of mitosis. And generally what happens is within the membrane of the one cell, you have one cell, the nucleus, or shall we say the DNA, all the information that makes that one nucleus becomes two nucleuses within the cell. And as it's doing that, the cell is kind of elongating. And then after the two new nuclei have defined themselves, there is the snapping of that membrane, of that one membrane, and now you have two different cells. That's mitosis. Hello, question everything. But now generally what happens, except in aberrant situations, is that you will have two identical cells. In other words, there you have one set, you have one set of DNA that doubles itself, and then you have two instances of the original. Where my sense of this process was a creating of two packets according to resonance, or where you stood in your inner being at the time that kind of cosmic moment occurred. It's almost like, which side of the road were we standing when that happened? And that snapping kind of removed ambiguity from interactions. Hello, RC. Good day. Hope everybody's able to follow along here. Oh, I need some rolling paper. Now again, to me, there's a difference between kind of like a public unpacking of this process and a more intimate unpacking. So this is not going to be the intimate version of it. This is going to be the public version of it. This sense of snapping, it's almost like a tug of war. It's like almost like a tug of war where you have two teams, one on one side, one on the other, and they've kind of sorted themselves out according to, let's say, spiritual paths. And they're engaging in a tug of war, a nice intellectual exchange of ideas. And then that rope snapped. And where before the teams were connected by a common rope or a common thread, that thread snapped. Okay, Ellie, well, you take care of your business and to the best of your ability. Yes, Christopher, that's exactly, the interesting thing was I didn't feel any building of this. Like very often when something is coming, you can kind of, it's almost like watching water boil. You can tell the water's going to boil, and then when it boils, you have boiling water. This was just like, I didn't even know the stove was turned on. And next thing you know, there's a pressure cook. There's a pressure situation. The lid's on too tight, and the water's boiling, and then the lid blows off. I had no sense of anything like this about to occur. And I know that it isn't just myself, because of other people that I've shared with privately giving big confirmation. And and so that's kind of like why I'm really made a topic of this tonight, because there are certainly a Gnostic interpretation or a telistic interpretation for what was felt. It was really good to run into somebody, a friend of mine, actually one of the people who was one of the reasons I moved to Virginia, Uncle Butchie being the other, or Butch Robbins to be precise. And his name is Bill. And because part of what I wanted to see was, okay, this snap happened. It seems I certainly have experienced effects at some level, but most of those effects I've experienced online. So I wanted to know what were the effects in my real life, in flesh and blood interactions. And fortunately, I had a feeling that this particular friend of mine, things would still be the same, because he's not a pretender. A big part of the snap was there's a lot of pretending, and a lot of the pretending is not conscious, but it doesn't stop. It still doesn't stop that there's a fictional aspect to certain things that we do. And so that was great confirmation. And also, where he is, somebody had dug a ditch for some of the naturally occurring water to go into, and it was this perfect, beautiful Virginia red-orange clay. So I have a nice piece of it, because when I was doing my garden, I happened to have a piece of clay, and it was pure clay. There was no organic material in it. And I said, oh, I could make something with this. I could, print it out and maybe carve a rune or some other thing on it, and either set it in the sun for a soft bake, or maybe, next time I'm cooking my French fries, put it in there. And I get frozen French fries, organic Yukons, and then maybe, bake it and then actually have a regular, baked clay tablet. I mean, that's how pure this clay is. But it wasn't big enough, so I picked up another piece of clay to add to it, but the other piece of clay had some roots and some compost even into it, and as soon as that happened, it wasn't this beautiful piece of clay that I could roll into a ball and it was smooth and no cracks, where the organic material makes it have openings. So I got this big chunk. And also I was able to take some sand that occurs. There's a spring that runs through the property. So it looks like a stream, but it's the stream produced by a spring. And so I got some sand, because I got myself another aloe vera plant, and they really love to be in sand. So I got some sand out of the thing. So anyway, everything, it was beautiful. I mean, of course, my relationship to nature, to Mother Earth, to Gaia, to the planetary animal mother, of course nothing shifted there, because I was already on board, as many people in this chat are. In other words, what was real there was no impact on what was real. but on the aspects of our existence in this world. I'm not talking about the planet, I'm talking about the world. So much of it is fiction. So much of even what we might consider knowledge is based in fiction. Oh, hello, soul traveler. So it really seems that part of this snapping occurred along lines of what is genuine, what is real in across dimensions, and what is part of the fiction of the modern world. And I'm going to use the word archontic world because that is why things are fucked up. I mean, humans can engage in all kinds of fuckery on their own. But the grand fuckery that we call the world is not of human origin. It takes 100% human participation to make it work, to function, but it didn't originate in the human mind. I guess there's something I heard in a live chat, and I guess it's something about, and it probably ties back to myself a little bit about it seems like there's an archon under every rock. Archons are no place to be found in nature with a capital N, so we wouldn't find archons under a rock. No, where we find the archons are in our systems, our legal systems, any system on this world, and in our psyches. That's where you find archontic influence. Also, there was something about fearing archons. Nobody who knows what this phenomena is has any fear of an archon. It's not something to fear. It's something to ignore, and depending on your emotional state, maybe resist. Fear. There's nothing to fear. The only agency is through gaslighting us, or creating a fiction, or we get into like a little bit of a snit, and then it seems like we're talking to ourselves, and whatever, and then if anybody knows that our brains are receivers, then you realize that when you get into certain funks, there are certain transmissions that come through that really resonate with the funk you're in, and can assist you in your funkery. So I just wanted to kind of clear that out, because apparently I don't know, because I guess within our community, I'm the one using the word archon and archontic the most. I mean, when you think of the live streams, if anybody's picking up anything about archons and archontic, it's probably somehow, at least obliquely, referring to me. So I just wanted to be very clear that archons are nothing to fear. I can't imagine having ever giving any kind of language confirmation of that. And although the influence is ubiquitous, because it is actually the spirit of the world, not the earth, that yes, it is ubiquitous, but under every rock, no. And if and if they did hide under rocks and you could actually see them, they would present themselves as something sweet and cuddly, just like they do on the astral plane in the form of archangels. So anyway, I'll probably drop. That's it. I just wanted to make sure that it seemed like, since I am the main source of archons and archontic language, I wanted to be very clear that they don't hide under rocks, and they're nothing to fear. but the influence is ubiquitous everywhere, because the world systems are built on it. The world's religions are steeped in it. The Western magical traditions are all about contact with them. Of course, they present otherwise, but trickster is the name, is one of the names of their game. So I'm going to join the conversation about clay. I put that nice piece in a plastic bag, but I also put the sand in the same plastic bag. So I'm going to have to separate it and wait for it to dry out so I can scrape the sand off, because I don't want any sand in my clay. So getting back to the full moon, I can imagine that a live chat might be not the best vehicle for experiences, because I know I needed face-to-face, or at least real voice, to share what I went through. There was no way anybody's going to get me to type it out. But I guess the question is, did anybody else... Two questions. First question is, did anybody else feel that there was something super intense, like different than other full moons about this full moon that just passed on Friday? And did anybody else experience, if not a snap, that whatever it was, the world is not the same after it? So those are the questions. Did you either A, notice it was way more intense than other full moons, and then in the aftermath, have you noticed things shifted? And I think somebody who, I tune into, Lisa Harrison. And of course, Lisa Harrison's interviews with John Lamb Lash are in the description here. And the reason I picked those is because John thinks they're the finest interviews that he did as far as delivering the Sophianic narrative. But Lisa Harrison has been working with something that gives her information about, I guess, how things are going with dimensions or the world or whatever. This entity's name is Lilu. And if I might have it wrong, but I think I heard that Lilu first made contact with Lisa through Alexa, one of those things that you ask questions and they talk to you. But Lilu, who Lisa has, you could almost, it's not a channeling, but it's a source, I guess, of, the kind of information that many people in the New Age, or in anything. Myself, at 18, I got exposed to the Seth material and read all of that, and it was actually, I had started dabbling in Western magical traditions at 17. Okay, I'm 65, do the math. It was 48 years ago. And, ritual spells and, all kinds of things. And I never quite took to it. something felt off to me. Some of it just felt silly to me. And then, and as I'm still kind of still looking into it, but not really resonating with it, then I got exposed to the Seth material, which was profound metaphysical information, and some might call it spiritual too. It actually, the whole concept of we create our own reality, that really came through from the Seth material. And then Esther and Abraham Hicks picked up on supposedly that's Seth that they're channeling too. If it is, Seth is certainly different coming through a different channel. It's almost like the Seth I read was kind of like a postgraduate course in its depth and profundity and the amount of kind of brain power you had to come to really unpack it. And then the Seth that came through the Hicks couple was more like junior high school. But it had been like about, I guess, I forget when it came out, but it had been some years. And this all was occurring while the schools were giving people less of a good education that would prepare them for discernment and the ability to look at things relatively objectively. So you could say it was the Seth for the times. But anyway, that the whole we create our own reality, that comes out of the Seth material. And that's right around, like the very early 70s. I think there was a book written that wasn't dictated by Seth, the Seth material. That came out in 68 or 69, I think. I think that the first book, Seth Speaks, I think came out like in 71 or 72 or something like that. So anyway, so I kind of, as I began my magical, it's also when Radagast first started to showed up in my life. And so when that happened, it seemed like, well, we have some studies to do. But what do we study? So I said, like anybody else, I started with kind of witchcraft, Western magic, some of the beginnings of Hermetic stuff. And I love alchemy. The alchemy is not, to me, it's not, like an Earth system or what I'm going to call an archontic system or a space-based system. Let's call it that, okay? Off planet. That's like on-planet systems and are off-planet systems. Systems that come out of heaven. Alchemy is a language of relationships of the solar system, many energies, and I love alchemy. I love the language of alchemy. And alchemy is not a system. Alchemy is a language. It is it's magical understanding. But years later, and especially once I found the Sophianic narrative, I realized that for all of the metaphysical goodies that came out of the Seth material, as usual with anything kind of coming from less than wholesome sources, much of, you could say, the fuckery of it was in the omissions. Like you can be given great knowledge about how things work, but the center of it, like where is the real operative center? If that gets misrepresented or omitted, we have fuckery. Oh, it's years old, Oswald. So, and I wouldn't recommend it anymore because it's leaving out, it leaves out the important thing, like who we are, how we got here, the earth being created, who we are on this created earth, and our relationship to the galaxy. And so there'll always be more questions, but the existential questions still kind of remained unanswered. It wasn't until I entered into the dreaming by being exposed to the Sophianic narrative that the existential answers were answered. So then we can get on to questioning the local stuff, how to make things better, what's wrong with the local situation. Because the big questions, the ones that are like kind of like, it's like I can't really settle in until I have these things answered. The Sophianic narrative settles in a way that I could never get settled and plugged in before. So having, once the existential questions of our existence and the rhyme and reason, like how about why is there evil in our world? When these questions are answered quite definitively and satisfactory, at least for one's own setting, well then now you can get into some of the details about the nuts and bolts and the frictions and lubes of our interactions with each other, of the human species, the human animal, and the tribes and communities that we create. So part of this snapping experience of mine was almost like where we stood existentially when that moon went full. And where we stood is where we stand. I would say, and I'm not the only one experiencing it, coming, at least personally, to grips with what it meant to me and to other people that I share the inner space with. There was grief, like as in grieving, associated with this snap. And I don't want to expound on that. I'll kind of just leave that for interpretation. Now, I notice I haven't been buffering or breaking down tonight because I did get more internet. And the funny thing is I have no idea how long the stream has gone because according to YouTube, I'm offline. I bet you if I refreshed my browser, I do that, but I don't want to refresh and then find out that I'm not here. But being as I can look at my regular clock, and since I started just a few minutes after 9, I guess we've been doing this for about 45 minutes. Oh, thank you, 9. Now, the interesting thing is I know that, we have some telestae or telestai here along, mixed in with the greater community. I know that you probably all telestai had to have had a very similar experience, because whenever I talk to other people, and not just telestai necessarily, other earth-based people, other people who are grounded and in communication and in great deep agape with the Earth Mother. Because once you plug into her, we're all kind of getting the same thing. It's amazing how I might be using certain Gnostic or Telestic or even Celestic terms in certain people I speak to. And in certain cases, it's a vocabulary that, it is like it's not that there's no communication, but they come with their own vocabulary. So I use my words, they use their words, but we're talking about the same thing. We're experiencing the same effects. We're experiencing, as we like to call our Aeonic mother, Mama. We're experiencing Mama. Mama is Mama. There is so little variation, and even when anybody I talk to who's working with Mama, the similarities that as we just sit down and share and compare notes are astounding, because the source is the same. Thank you, Nish. Which will bring me, I guess, to the word occult with regards to what is occult. Occult, we might as well why don't we just say what occult means? It means hidden. It's either hidden by the practitioner, the keepers of certain information for their own preservation, or it's hidden by antagonists of the information for the preservation of their narrative. So things like the Kabbalah are not a cult. Nobody's hiding the Kabbalah. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth, put it in a search engine. You'll have endless supplies of reading the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. It's not occulted, so therefore it is not a cult. What is occulted is the intelligence and consciousness of Mother Earth and what we knew. In other words, when all the witches were being burned, especially in Germany after the Protestant Reformation, they weren't being burned because they knew of Hermes Trismegistus or the Kabbalah. No. They were being burned because they had the old ways. The Druids were exterminated because they kept the old ways. So what is really a cult is what is actually purposely been hidden either by the keepers of it for their own safety or by the keepers of the new system who consider it completely deadly to their new system. So in many ways, the mysteries, the Eleusinian mysteries and what they taught, that is a cult. I mean, you could type, into a YouTube search engine, just the word occult, you will have viewing for months. And if you can type in the word occult and then have viewing for months, it's not very occulted, is it? Yes. Shamanic, I don't like the word ist, but that's your own thing. I'm not going against it. I'm just going to my own personal thing. Shamanic animism. The core of the human species, the human animal, is animism. Everything is alive. And anybody allowed to experience nature gets that. And then the shamanic journeying through our dreams, through trance states, through medicine plants, is a further experience where in many ways, let's say like where you might sense a certain tree is alive, you might even hear it speaking to you. In a shamanic plane, the tree will actually might even give you a name. I mean, you can engage it in a way that is more like we engage with each other. Hello, Lita. So the from the way we're on this planet for thousands of years before voices from heaven started grabbing people's attention, was animism and the practice of a shamanic consciousness through, and to different levels of their being. But all of us dream. A dream is our recall of some shamanic work that we did during the night. Thank you for sharing that, Tamu. Or Tamu. So I just, this Can't You Hear Me Gnostic, we're of course, hello Hans, of course we're going to be talking about magic. We're the magical child. But there's earth magic and there's sky magic. And there is what has been truly occulted, and then what is called a cult. And one of the reasons, I think, also for the promotion of calling what isn't even truly hidden a cult is because it has that a little bit of the forbidden or the little bit of specialty. And that's something that the off-planet beings know about, the curiosity of human beings. And then if you don't have self-validation, we look for the things that are special. So to have access to forbidden knowledge, the occult, ooh, that's pretty juicy. That's a lure to just about any human, myself included. But a lot of, especially in the last few millennia, let's say, or maybe just the last couple hundred years, there's hooks in that bait. And ask a fish about hooks and bait. Once you're on, it's not so easy to get off. Oh, do you have the niche? Do you have the Celtic Tree Oracle? That's an amazing pack. I have it behind me. That's the one I use the least because it's really quite deep. The other one, I basically, the go-to divinatory tool for me is the runes of the older Futhark and animal medicine cards. All right, so I'm certainly feeling a little lighter than I did before the stream because I wasn't confident that I could. It's kind of like staying on the stepping stones of a stream and trying not to get your feet wet. And by the way, that spring I got the sand from, I drank some water from it too. I think if I recall, Hans I found Hans as, a recommendation, and I thought I might want to check out more of his stuff, so I subscribed. And I'm still subscribed. And and then, like a lot of us who have public names, like I have my name public, if I subscribe to somebody, they're going to see, oh, hey, this guy ModWiz1225 subscribed to me. So then he kind of left me a comment somewhere that he would be checking out my streams. And I'm just saying, well, the best way to find out whether or not you're going to like what I do or not is coming to one of these streams. Okay, Hans. The kale I planted a little over a week ago is coming up very nicely. My first zucchini sprouted. And I was going to plant my beets and carrots today, but I went out with my friend, and he showed me all kinds of things. I had a great time with him. And then when I got back, I kind of had enough time to maybe get it done, but then the thunderstorm started rolling in, so it's going to have to wait another day or so. Plus, I do have to prep the ground a little bit more. I got some nice organic vermiculite, which I'm going to mix in with the clay, because when you have roots like, carrots and beets, the way clay can compact can really hinder the roots that like to get nice and chubby under the earth. So by putting some vermiculite, it'll help the clay to expand. Plus, I'll throw some compost into that mix. Tamu, a lot of people keep their subscribes private. Like sometimes I'll see my numbers go up and I go and check and I have no idea what's going on. But that's all right. I certainly understand. I understand. I understand even the good side of not opening yourself up for that. But I'm a big proponent that we need more face-to-face. We need to know who we are. For us to be successful in creating community. So that form of anonymity for me feels like I'm not walking my talk. And I'm not saying that is the case. That's just my take on it, and it could be just a silly aspy take on it, and I'm willing to own that. Let me pull that out. I'll be right back. Okay. So, I'm just for a moment, I'm going to go into my own screen so I see this real time. So this is the Celtic Tree Oracle. And it's a divination system. It says right here, a system of divination based on the Druidic lore and wisdom, of the Druidic lore and wisdom. And it also has, one of the interesting things it has with the cards, this is probably the card I pulled the last time, which is you. And on the side of each of the cards, there are kind of what look like staves, or with cross lines on them, and sometimes they're straight like that. Here's another instance where, see the difference? In one case you have a straight line, and it was at 4 or 3 crossbars, maybe 5 horizontal perpendicular, where in this case you have a vertical one, and then you have only one line, and it's at an angle. What these are kind of pictorial iterations of the alphabet that the Druids had, that they pronounce Om. If you were to look at it phonetically, it looks like Ogham or Ogham. It's spelled Ogham, but it's pronounced in Irish. It's pronounced Om, like Ohm's law. And you could write it, but the other thing was there was also a way of doing knots that allowed you to give somebody like a piece of string, and there were words on the string by the way it was knotted. It's pretty deep. And what I like, again, is it's based in nature, not in the heavens. It's based on our home and the beings of our home, not alien beings. And there are plenty of alien beings in that, let's call it the shamanic space. One of the funny stories, I guess, I forget who told it. I might have heard it from a few sources, and it was somebody who went down to Peru or something to do an ayahuasca ceremony. And this is before ayahuasca tourism started. So, you had real ayahuasqueros kind of taking you through that. And, again, they've been doing this, so they have their own form of kind of ethnogenic shamanism or shamanic practice. So this gentleman was a man, and he takes his ayahuasca, and he's in a deep, deep trance. And he has the ayahuasquero, monitoring him, and everything goes well. So when he kind of comes back to, being able to converse, the shaman asks him, "So how was it?" And he says, "It was fantastic." Because I had these, kind of winged beings. They look like, kind of like winged dragons. And he goes, and they answered all my questions about how we were created and how we were on this earth. And he goes, I have my answer. I got my answers now. And the shaman laughed. And he goes, they tell the same lies to everybody that'll listen to them. And that's part of why although we all have shamanic capacities, to be a shaman is somebody who is able to guide people through that territory, of somebody who knows that territory well, like a nature guide would. And it knows the critters, it knows the pretenders, and it knows what is working with us rather than against us. So I found that an interesting story. Again, fortunately, he was with an experienced shaman who is very aware of how these alien entities basically tell the same lie to everybody because they're not creative. Any creativity they ever exhibit, they got from one of us because they get somebody to believe in them, and we engage with them, and they do excellent mimicry of us. Yeah, I agree. Hans, again, that's why I talked about, like kind of ayahuasca tourism. Yeah. I would, especially, I mean, I was working at Omega where I'm glad I cannot remember the name of a shaman who happened to be a PhD, had books, and so he was at Omega, certifying shamans. And when you were done, not only did you get your piece of paper that you were certified by this world-recognized PhD shaman, you even got like a little cluster of plastic rattles. Plastic rattles. And one of the people who was there for a week, it was actually somebody I had known. I'd worked there for years, so some of these people came every year, and they took different courses. And it was somebody that I actually knew, and it was occasionally, if we read, because we all ate it basically at the same time at Omega, because meals were served at a certain time. So a lot of times people that you had met at a client, you might meet in a dining room, and they might ask to join you, and conversations break out, and you actually form friendships. So I knew this lady, and she was a delightful woman. I mean, I thought, she was playing with dealt a good hand of consciousness and psychological stability pretty well. She was a really nice, wonderful lady. And anyway, so I remember when she arrived, one of the first things she wanted to do was she wanted me to get her ready for what she was going through, so she came in for a treatment. And there were also some things, I also did, there were energy sessions, there were combinations of massage and energy. So I think she came in for a combination, a little massage for her nervous system, and then some energy to kind of get her prepped. And I think I saw her one time during the week. It was a week-long class, and she seemed to be doing fine. And then I saw her, she wanted one more treatment before she left. And now she was a graduate. She was now officially a certified shaman. She was still the same delightful, balanced woman that I had known. Who now had plastic rattles. So Hans, that was actually that's kind of like a little story about, watch out, there's a lot of pretenders. And it's really funny, the ones who pretend the best are often the ones who can actually often make a living from being a shaman. Sometimes a really good living. Especially if you're a PhD and you have books, and there's like, we're still in a kind of thing where if somebody's a PhD, well, then that must be a good source. And if somebody's going to explain woo to us, and that word woo is interesting because I learned it, that it actually is obviously a Chinese word. And I guess that's what the Taoists call their shamanic practices. They call it woo. And here we are, with woo-woo and woo. So it's interesting how all these words go together. Oh, geez, Hans. No, leave that alone. Yeah, pretenders has come up quite a bit, hasn't it, Niche? The interesting thing is it's been a theme that's been coming up for those of us doing the kind of the lunar cycle, or the following the Dakini things, because especially the one not this cycle arose in the crab, the one that arose in the twins was quite a bit about shadow and pretense and masks falling off. And masks falling off is when pretense begins to fail or is totally exposed. Yes, Niche. The revealing is underway and people are showing their laundry a lot of late. Yep. It's helpful. Get to see where all that butt hurt's coming from. But it's been very clarifying. This moon has been enormously clarifying. Yeah. It's funny, I'm saying it has been enormously clarifying, and as you said, Niche says, I'm glad to see it personally. Yeah, because the clarity that it brings. Clarity is wonderful. Helps you set your course. Helps you. I mean, if you're a boat on water, you can avoid the rocks that you either know about or can see, rather than the ones just lurking under the surface, waiting to take a bite out of your hull. So the revealing, for those who enjoy truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be, has been very good. I got a bowl full of nice, delicious organic cherries waiting for me to eat them. They will be, the palate is waiting. I don't want to, obviously chewing on screen doesn't work. Yeah, that was a good sharing, Christopher. I agree with Niche. I know I know that some of my practicing shamanic type friends some of them are, this moon has been quite rough on them. Kind of inflammatory. So anyway, to you, the people I'm addressing, you know who you are. You have my empathy, to the empathy to a degree, because plugging in too much to you guys hurts, man. But you have my compassion and whatever. What I don't know exactly what I can do other than want you to be out of your situation as rapidly as possible. Okay, I see a question directed to I don't know who, saying, where are you based? Hans, if that's to me, I'm in Southwest Virginia. About an hour north of the North Carolina border, and west enough to be underneath the state of West Virginia. I'm kind of just on the eastern side of the Appalachians, or the Blue Ridge Mountains down here. And it's a wonderful area. It's a small town, and it's a really nice blend of the native Appalachians, kind of Scotch-Irish type people, very musical, very crafts based, and then the back to the land hippie movement of 30 years ago, who, based on things, Edgar Cayce mentioned this part of Virginia as far as being a safe place during the earth changes that he had predicted would be occurring in the 90s. So in the 70s, there was a huge influx of people, and these were capable people. These were people who came, they would kind of, naturally cluster into their own community, but it wasn't commune-based. They brought skills with them, including growing skills. And so, although when they first landed into Appalachia, there was a little bit like, oh God, what just landed in our midst? But once everybody got to know each other, we realized everybody here is good people, and we're pretty much, we kind of we look a little different, we dress a little different, the culture we grew up in is a little different, but how we perform in the world is a lot alike. So it's a great place to live. Plus it's at 2,500 feet. Humidity is something that is experienced really only, to me, a few days a year, and sometimes only a few hours of a day. The nights are almost never in the 70s. Every once in a while we'll stay in the 70s at the nighttime. But invariably, nighttime tends to be in the high 60s, mid 60s. Which makes having a simple exhaust fan sufficient for me to get through summers. We haven't officially hit 90 in this part of Virginia this year yet. We have not yet. We've gotten into the very high 80s, maybe even 89, 88. But like check the weather channel and what the official recording for what we are. I haven't seen a 90 yet. I haven't even seen it in the projected temperatures yet. And here we are, just about to enter August. I'm in the south. I'm in the south of Virginia at 2,500 feet and haven't had a 90-degree day yet. And I'm comfortable with 90 degrees. I mean, my ideal temperatures, I would say, are probably mid-80s, especially as a daytime temperature. I actually like my nights to be low 70s. Because I like to keep all my windows open. I like to keep an exhaust fan on, keep the fresh air coming in. But I don't want to have to put a sweater on or anything. Matter of fact, I like being naked as an option. Yeah, and of course, Raksha, the definition of shaman, and you have some people who are purists, where if you're not Mongolian speaking Tungus, then you're not, then you're not a real shaman. You might be something else. And again, a shaman, medicine man, ayahuasquero, other term. It's people who can go to places our bodies can't go to, but are part of our greater experience, the greater super. From the they go from the natural to the supernatural, which is what sits atop the natural world, which is what the word super means. Super means on top. So supernatural is the world on top of this world. So, and I think that to have a catch-all term, shaman, to but then that's the whole thing, is then you have, like, there's actually a role. Shaman is a role. A shamanic practice isn't a role, it's personal. A shaman is somebody who can help people with things that other people can't help them with. A shaman can assist people dealing with the aspects of their being that operate at a slightly more rarefied, or I don't want to use the word higher frequency. And certainly, most importantly, addresses our psyche in a way psychology wouldn't even imagine to go near. And just because psychology avoids it doesn't mean it isn't there. It just means that they don't go there. And since we participate in a greater reality, we need people who can help us with psychological things, and psychological issues turn into physical issues very quickly. Sometimes not so quickly, but ultimately you really can't walk around with psychological wounds without something in the physical body that's going to echo that. Hello, Crazy Beautiful. So, to me, whether you call yourself a medicine man, a witch doctor, these are people who are all providing kind of basically the same service to a non-technological community, and can also operate in a technical community, because despite all the technology, the design of our psyche, the design of our spirit, all has the same designer. Unfortunately, because of certain belief systems, especially the big ones, there's been some tinkering at a very strategic level with that composition. I had a thought, and then I was deciding, should I go there, and it kind of slipped from me, so I'm going to take that as my answer. Yeah, I don't even know how many people are in the chat. Somebody want to tell me how many people are actually participating in the chat? I have no information. Let me try these participants, see if they give it to me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, we have 6 people who, are participating in the chat. I don't know how many people are viewing it. I guess it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. What the numbers matter. It's just that usually all that information. Like I said, I'm still being told I'm offline. Hello, Sandy. Well, Christopher, I have the same thing. In other words, Raksha, to me, in my opinion, properly identifies as a shaman, operates and performs as a shaman. I have a shamanic practice. I do a lot of shamanic personal work. So we can speak shamanically, but I don't speak to him as a shaman. I mean, with me being the shaman, he's a shaman, and that's a thing. It's almost like, you know, I'm a bass player. So, you know, there's because I'm competent at it. It's not just because I can pick up a bass. So I think you did a you know, that's really beautiful wording. And while I practice some shamanic journeying, I don't identify myself as a shaman. And I don't identify myself as a shaman either, but shamanic journeying and shamanic information retrieval is a huge part of what I do. Thank you, Raksha. And you know, and part of parsing that out like you have, Christopher, is we're being honest with ourselves. We have enough respect for what a shaman is, and enough respect for ourselves to not pretend to be something that we're not. Because just because one is not a shaman does not deny one from having a full personal shamanic practice. Thank you for joining us, Question Everything. And I really, to me, the only time it really matters, you know, about people calling themselves shaman, when it's done to mislead or an inferior service might be offered because somebody wants to call themselves something that to one person means something important, and so it gets a little tricky. But when in a community where people have FaceTime with each other, take meals together, do things together, the scamming cannot happen in a community that can compare notes and compare results. You know, if you ask somebody to, you know, a wood carver to carve you something, and you know, hey, can you carve me a moose? And then you get something that looks more like an otter. You go, okay, that's not a bad otter, but it is one I asked for. Any reason why? Then you might find out that, never mind. Never mind. So, this has definitely gone smoother, and communication has been clear enough that I'm greatly relieved. I really went into the stream with some apprehension. Any among us, hello. Thank you for joining us. I've had a chance to be in a face-to-face with any among us, and he's a special guy. Especially, I love, because I'm an aspiring, not electrician, but somebody who can conceive electrical things, even build motors. But I'd like to build some amplifiers, and but it's all about understanding electricity and how it works, what kind of entity it is. And any among us, he understands electricity. Madfinger understands electricity quite well also. I had a chance to speak with them both at the same time. And when it came to that subject, where I'm kind of a newbie, oh, was I just moistening myself listening to them and knowing, oh, I could get a lot of good juice out of this. Yeah, tubes, Christopher. Tubes are the are where where the magic gets made. And if it doesn't matter to somebody, it's fine. But I mean, I have a good enough ear. Now I'm a bass player, so I have a Class D transistor amp. Class D is a really different beast than the old. Like I had a Galen Kruger bass amp some years ago. I finally sold it, and it was cold. I didn't like it. It had no warmth. It was powerful. It was very desired because it was powerful. It was very clean, but it was also very cold sounding to me. And I remember going in and trying out. I went into a music store and I tried out an amp by Yamaha. I think it was called Prometheus, and it wasn't a very powerful amp. And it was, like most bass amps are. It was transistors, and I went, listen to this tone. What is this? And then I realized that in the years since I had bought my Galen Kruger, which I got like in 1984. And this when I tried this one out in like 2010. That's over 2 decades. And I plugged in. I went, this is the most incredible sound. And I found out that at least for that there was a new kind of way of using transistors called Class D. Not only are Class Ds now behind these like little tiny things that weigh like 5 pounds and push 300 watts, they also are much more musical in how they reproduce sound. Not at all quite warm. So for bass, I mean, I have yet to play through no, I can't say I played through SVTs, Ampeg SVTs, which are a tube amp, but the SVT uses a tone stack. There's a certain kind of upper mid-range that you can't get rid of on an Ampeg that I don't like. I'm an old school kind of James Jamerson, Carol Kay, that kind of, very, a nice sound, but a rich, deeper sound. And the pushing of the higher mids, which is very much, I guess, appropriate for rock music. I cannot bond with an Ampeg bass amp. The old B15s were a little bit different, but when they got their SVT going and they went with that kind of higher mid-range, that it just sits there. I mean, a friend of mine, I went to practice and he goes, I got my Ampeg for you to play through. Everybody just loves playing it, but he plays with a lot of rock players. I play rock too, but even then my tone, I just never really, I don't like I'm not a big fan necessarily of the modern kind of rock tone. Oh yeah, I mean, they're powerful, but so I would like to build myself like a 40-watt bass tube amp. Because all you need is 2 6L6s and you got your 40 watts. But that's down the road. And especially with me, I play with a banjo player and a drummer, and I don't like playing loud anymore. I never really liked playing crazy loud, but since now I've gotten older and I really want to hear what's being played, I want to hear all the little nuances and shadows and tiny silences that occur between notes. I prefer a volume that allows that to occur. But it exposes you, when you play at those volumes. If whatever, there's no tone, there's no fatness to hide behind. If you can't make the sound fat with your hands and a humble amp, something's going on. I've always liked a good, clean bass tone for most instances. A rich bass tone. I've never been much for that overdriven sound that some bass players use as their de facto sound. Timmy Bogart, an incredible bass player that was with Vanilla Fudge and then Cactus and then Beck Bogart and Apogee. He liked a little bit of an overdriven tone, and I liked his overdriven tone, but it's not my tone. I mean, and he definitely he was just incredible. He was kind of like a kind of a combination. What I liked about Timmy Bogart is he brought the Motown feel with, so he had like the feeling of a James Jamerson and the attack of a Jack Bruce. Very, really, really cool bass player. But that's his tone. I've had, I'm influenced by many bass players, but overall, duplicating their tone has never really been something I went after. Unless I was playing a song that, like if I'm playing Beatle music, I will want to get something like a Paul McCartney tone. And part of it playing with a Hofner is Hofner's had a wooden bridge. They had a wooden bridge, although they sat in metal saddles. I had a Hofner, but not the Beatle bass. I had the single cutaway. I never liked the look of the Beatle bass. The single cutaway looks like a Les Paul. It's called the studio bass, the Hofner Studio. I think that's what they called it. Could be another name. But it had those notes, because of that wooden bridge. The notes didn't ring out as long as a metal bridge. There was a certain earlier natural decay, and it didn't ring quite the same way. So there was kind of a dunk instead of a doom. Get more of like a dunk, dunk. It was like, a decayed earlier, and that was largely because of the Hofner bass that he played. And since I owned a Hofner, I know exactly what it was, and then moved to another bass because I didn't want to have that to be limited, and I'm quite sure that's why Paul ended up playing other basses, although he still plays a Hofner bass. There's a place for it. There's a place for that kind of muted sound, and people like Carol Kay, sometimes in the studio, she would take a rag or, cotton, and she would stick it near the bridge, not enough to make the sound dead, but to kind of get that, to take some of that ring out of it. So I just let all the different bass players, I'd like to see how they, what tones they used, how they approached, bass patterns within the chords given to them, how they play with drummers, how they wove their bass melodies with the other melodies happening either with the guitar player or other instruments, and then I created my own sound. To me it's the thing to do. I never tried to be another bass player. I had my bass heroes, and my heroes influenced me, but I was going to be my own hero. Good night, Christopher. Yeah, I've heard of Mike Oldfield, but Tubular Bells is probably the only thing I'm kind of familiar with. Yeah, I'm kind of glad to take it. I'm glad somebody took me into the musical thing, because I don't have to watch what I probably won't offend anybody. Speaking about music. Because there would be certain tones that I myself would not necessarily want to use, but other people use them, and I wouldn't recognize them without that tone. I feel the same way about 5-string basses. In other words, none of my guitar heroes, at least when I was watching them, played 5-string basses. The only one who went from 4-string up was Timmy Bogart. But Paul McCartney, 4-string bass, Jack Cassidy, John Entwistle, Stanley Clarke, Victor Wooten. They play 4-string bass. It's a 4-stringed instrument. Now, that being said, I have a friend of mine, a local person, whose bass playing I enjoy immensely. Love listening to him play. I like how he inserts himself into music, and he plays a 5-string bass, the one with the lower string. So he has has the B string. And when I hear him and how he plays bass and how he does it, I understand why he went to a 5-string bass. The kind of sounds he wants to create and how deep he wants to sit in the frequency spectrum, I totally get why he plays a 5-string bass, and I think he makes the 5-string bass sing. I love the way he plays the 5-string bass. So even though for me, the bass for me is a 4-stringed instrument, when I wouldn't, it's not like, 5-string isn't a real bass. Fuck, I would never be that ignorant. No, it's not for me. That's not the bass. But like I said, I have a friend of mine, and I couldn't imagine him playing without that lower string that he makes quite a lot of use of. And it sounds wonderful. I think there were certain kinds of quote unquote shamans who like to travel to Asgard. I mean, I have to, if of the little the Norse or Viking shamanic map, which is based on Yggdrasil, the world tree, and Alfheim and Jotunheim and Asgard, Midgard or Middle Earth. I love that. I love that shamanic map. I think there's a more authentic Gaian map, but I love the Norse map is really cool. Okay, Oswald, I guess you could say now I'm playing. What is it? I switched over. I'll show you. I used to play round wounds. I mean, the earliest basses had flat wounds, but I tried round wounds, and I tried rotor sounds, one of the most expensive strings I could find, and John Entwistle actually was the person that designed rotor sounds with the engineers. He wanted that because he wanted that really rich spectrum. But he changed his strings, like in the studio, he changed his strings for every different song he played. Whatever, if you like the rotor sound tone, you better buy stock in the company, because that tone lasts for about a week, and then the high ends just start falling off of those strings. They have to be brand spanking new to really get the real rotor sound thing. So I went to other things. I tried GHS and did elixirs. Elixirs were the last strings I had on my bass. Helped a little bit with the squeak, but since I'm playing with a banjo player, I switched to D'Addario nylon wound strings. And they have a steel core, but they have nylon wrapped around them. And I love them, and my band, even my drummer, they all love the tone I get from this. And they have nice ring to them, and to me it's especially since I don't like it to be too bright. If anything, I was able to turn the treble up a little bit with these strings, on my amp. I don't want to plug my amp. I mean, I have my amp right here, but I'm not going to plug in. But I play nylon wound. I play steel nylon wound strings, and they are flat now, so there's no squeak, and that's the beauty of it. Because I'm a busy bass player, at least with like where my positions are. So I might be playing here one moment and here another moment, and in that transition with the round wounds, you could hear the travel sometimes if I didn't lift my hand completely off the strings. You'd hear shriek, shriek, sharp, shrink, and actually, I remember there's a piece I wrote, and the way it's played to lift off of the strings really kind of ruins it. And once I got that funky tone. This is funny. I have an amp with effects, and I have to switch it, but right now it's got like this octaver on it. So it's. So that's kind of a funny. That's not the tone I want. Anyway. This is the tone I want. That's better. So there's a song that, again, it's actually one of the ones I wrote when I was playing quite a lot. But it kind of has like this little, and it's supposed to have some chorus on it, so it sounds a little richer. But it's kind of something like this. So anyway, when I had my round wounds on, and I'm doing a position like this. Well, now that I'm holding it like this, I can't play it quite the same. But I'm holding position like this, and it moves from this position to this position to this position, and it's really meant to be delicate. You know, I'm doing all that stuff, and I'd be playing it. And I remember trying to record it, and every time I transitioned from here to here, I'd hear shriek, shriek. And it used to make me crazy, and if I lifted my fingers up, it deadened it, and the whole thing was to kind of carry the tone from one position to the other. And so lifting up got rid of the squeak, but it also killed the kind of carrying of each position. So this fixed it. I love these strings. I really do. Yeah, Oswald, when you said it sounds like a double bass, that was probably when because I was using I have the one of the amp, the one I have in my room is the Bronco, and the Bronco has it's a mod. You know, I can get an Ampeg sound. Actually, I could dial in an Ampeg sound on this amp, and it has very much of an Ampeg sound, and I can dial in a Galen Kruger sound. I tend to be using the old-fashioned Fender TV bass mod. They were a tube amp, and I kind of, since I like an old school sound, I used an old school mod. But I didn't realize I wasn't on TV bass. I was on one of the Rumble settings, which is my main amp, is a Rumble amp that I happen to really love. I was surprised. I didn't really like the name, the Rumble. Sounds goofy, but ever since I got it, I love it. It's a great amp. 350 watts. The new ones have 500 watts. Cost the same, and I tell you, I don't need 500 watts. 350 is more than sufficient, and it also it has, you know, an XLR out, so you can plug right in the board anyway. But it also, when they cranked up the ampage, they kind of redesigned the tonnage. They kind of went to what most modern bass amps have. You have, you know, bass, low mid, high mid, and treble. So they break it up into those four things. Where the Rumble I have didn't do that. What it did is you had a bass, then you had a middle control of where along the certain frequency spectrum that would include from low mids to high mids, you could pick where along that frequency you wanted it to peak or drop. So you could kind of really dial in the exact frequency you wanted to either drop out or raise in. And then the other switch, you know, usually it's like low mid, high mid. In this case, it was a mid selector, and then you could either cut or boost that exact same frequency. Where I find when you have separate two mid controls, they kind of shit on each other. You know, I want a little of this, I want a little of this, and they kind of, you know, they butterfly over each other, and they sit on each other, and it creates a little mush for me. So for me to be able to like take an actual frequency selector along a certain, you know, the band that we would call the mid frequencies, which would be above the bass and below the treble frequencies, and then to kind of select right where it is that we either want to pull a frequency out by doing the minus side or pull it up by doing the plus side. I love that, and they don't make that Rumble amp anymore. And they don't even make my Bronco anymore. A lot of the equipment I have, you know, with everything being the newest and the snazziest and an upgrade, and for me, a lot of the upgrades in things they got right the first time is actually looking for something to do to something that already works, but what do we add? And then they start experimenting, and to me sometimes they experiment in ways that are not to my pleasure. That means nothing. And you know, to me, a lot of people that I know of, a lot of bass players like two separate mid controls. I like a sweepable mid, so I have what I like. They don't make it anymore, I'll take good care of it and keep it. So it all works out. I got to tell you, this 40-watt Bronco, I have played in drumming situations. A lot of people have commented on how amazingly loud it is for a 40-watt amp. It's a nice, good size box for it. It's only got a 10-inch speaker in it, one 10-inch speaker, and they had double ports on it, and they really nailed this thing. There's no booming. It just puts out good, fat sound. I love it. I mean, and it's very easy to. Here. No, I can't. I was going to pick it up, but you know, it isn't very big. It used to sit behind me. It used to sit on a shelf behind me. Then I moved it to the floor. And even I got a modern player Fender Jaguar, which doesn't have all the other things that the original Jaguar did, with all the different dials and whatever. It's just two pickups and a selector switch. I love it. I love it, and I got it on a sale. So a lot of stuff I bought when I was working at Omega and had a little spending money, they don't make anymore. If I had to replace it, if I could find it, it would have to be secondhand. But so I have equipment that is like just perfect for this modern wizard here. Very happy with the stuff. Oh, you had a Fender Rumble 100. So I guess you had sounds. If you had the older model, then I guess you also had the sweeping mid. And it just so happens that the sweepable mids I thought is just beautiful for me. I have parametric equalization on my bass as well, but I never use it. What's good is in certain rooms. I'm going to put up my camera and I'll be able to see what the hell what I'm showing you guys. Like I said, it's kind of hard to see these because they're dark, but I have what I like about this bass. Here we go, it's a little better. Is it has a volume, obviously, and then this is a selector switch, so I can switch. And it has a mid setting, and the mid setting means you get equal signal from the front pickup, you know, from the bridge pickup and the bridge pickup and the neck pickup. All right. And so sometimes, and then down here this is where I have my bass, my mid, and my treble. What's nice is I have a switch here, and this switch kind of goes from like 250 to 500. So if I do engage this helps me to kind of fine tune where this is. It's almost like I can set it to, like when I turn this switch where I hit or cut, I can do it at a high mid 500 megahertz. Or I can go down to 250, and then I adjust from 250 rather than 500. So it's really cool that way. This is the bass, you know, but I keep these flat. I play them flat. So generally what's happening when I'm playing live, if I think, oh, I'd like a little treble, what I do is I take my selector switch and I roll it towards this back pickup, and that immediately gives me a sharper tone. And if it's a little sharp and I want it to be a little flatter, I roll it towards this pickup. Usually I have it set in the middle, but I tend to have it, usually I have it notched just a little bit to have a little bit more bias on my bridge pickup. To give that little sharper tone, but every once in a while I want it to go softer, and I'll either roll it in the middle or actually roll it a little bit towards here. And so it turns out that this rolling between these two pickups gives me the tone control that I want, because I tend to get the main tone I want by setting my amp correctly and then using my hands. You know, if I let my middle fingernail grow too long and it starts clipping a string, it produces a treble picky sound that I don't want. So I have to make sure that I always trim it, or it really throws off my playing, because suddenly I have all these high ends that I didn't intend to be in there, because instead of flesh plucking a note, I now have a nail kind of giving that high end to it. So it is all those little subtleties of tone. So I kind, but I tend to work from, I use my amp to get my basic tone. The guitar has its own tone. The tone coming out of my hands, and then with that little selector switch, I can just kind of get a little bit sharper, a little bit deeper, and I love it. It's really, it really works for me. So, kind of coming down to the end of this Can't You Hear Me Gnostic? I know I certainly shared my full moon aftermath and unpacking, and thank you for indulging me with that. And that kind of, I guess, brings us to the close of this Can't You Hear Me Gnostic. The live streams have been really wonderful, and they're made wonderful by the wonderful participation of the people who come here and how they interact with each other. I just really a lot of gratitude on my part for a rich live chat. And so I guess with that, I will bring this stream to a close. If anybody has any last minute things to ask or say, I'll hold space here for a moment. Take a hit on my non-alcoholic Klosthaler beer. It's German brew. That means it's pure. No weird things in it. Much love to you all, indeed. Hello, Genevieve. So, and if you're interested in what this Sophianic narrative is that I mentioned earlier on, obviously it's been about a half an hour since I've been not getting Gnostic-y. Last half hour has been music-y, and I really enjoyed that. I don't know if you can tell, I really love music. And that I forget. Anyway, I made it through it. I was a little concerned. It was a very intense time, and there's still I'm still waiting for, like Lisa, like according to Lisa Harrison, the event happens tomorrow. The event. But this full moon was so eventful. It's almost like, well, maybe whatever created the sense of an event happened then, and it's going to take 4 days before people start looking around and going, holy shit, what was that? It's kind of like it happens, but it happens, little subtle things, and then you start going out and you think the world is just the same, and you start bumping into people and interacting, and all of a sudden you're going, ooh, we're not in Kansas anymore. So anyway, I will now follow through with my good night, and I'm stopping streaming now. I think it might happen immediately, but I'll talk just in case there's dead time. And smile, and sending some love, or sending lots of love to you all. Oh, I bet you I didn't stop it. No, I didn't. Now